Travis, recently you posted a video about the effects of Anonymous's 2008 protest of the Church of Scientology. In that video, you mentioned that if it weren't for the work of Anonymous, that you would have never been able to make it as far as you have in exposing the ills of Scientology. Would you please explain this a little more in depth, please? What would have happened to you had you started speaking out if there had been no Anonymous? What do you think that you would be doing now? Do you think that the Anonymous protests can be seen as the tipping point in Scientology's death spiral? This is a tough question. These are tough questions because I'm not exactly sure how things would have moved out or progressed if Anonymous had not come on the scene in 2008. I absolutely said and will stand by the statement that Anonymous was absolutely a tipping point because they brought international recognition to the abuses and ridiculousness, both, of the Church of Scientology and of the human rights abuses and financial crimes and that sort of thing that it's been engaged in for so long. Had they not done that, Scientology would have continued and does continue to a lesser degree though, but they still do this. But they would have continued it with full force to have gone after each individual specific critic of Scientology who comes out on YouTube or on media or on a blog or anything like that. Anonymous really leveled the playing field in a lot of ways, mainly because they were so large, such a mass of people coming at Scientology all at once that Scientology's policies of bullying down and beating down and destroying utterly any critic of Scientology simply couldn't be executed. It was just unrealistic because there were just too many people. Scientology couldn't find out who all these people were because they had masks on and they were taking a metro rail or a bus. They weren't driving their cars so that Scientology could collect their license plate numbers. So it truly was an anonymous protest. And that overwhelmed their ability to fight back or do their usual standard operating procedure. As a result of that, they were put also into a public light that they had never experienced before. The protests went on for years. There were massive, the big ones were at the beginning, but they continued. And these large groups of people kept coming out to individual churches and disrupting their activities and protesting loudly in front of them. And it was great. I mean, it really was a brilliantly executed strategy, you know. But when I talk about leveling the playing field, I mean that because of all of the exposure, Scientology suddenly was in the spotlight, so much so that it couldn't continue to carry out the same level of fair game activities against critics so openly. You know, Scientology is a bully. Right? It's kind of a third grade bully, and that they, you know, will catch you when the teacher's not around, beat you up, and then claim that, you know, nothing happened. They didn't do anything. Right? That was their old way of going about doing things if they ever got caught or had, you know, the government or legal forces or whatever got involved. Or they would just litigate you to death in the court system, which was another policy of the church. Right? They just like keep going after you. Again, they couldn't do that with Anonymous. And so once the light of truth was kind of shown on Scientology in such a glaring manner, it couldn't really as effectively use its same old tactics. And so what you saw after Anonymous was you saw those tactics implemented on very specific people for very specific reasons, mainly that David Miscavige was personally irate and vindictive towards Marty Rathman, Mike Rinder specifically, right? They had worked for and with him for years, so it was personal when he went after them, when he had PIs stalking them and 6 or 7 months of the squirrel busters outside Rathman's house. I mean, that was pretty crazy, and that was all post-Anonymous. But that was the sort of thing that, had Anonymous not happened, I and other critics who have, you know, come out on YouTube or come out in the public would have received, right? And I had set up my life when I first started speaking out so that I was ready for something like that. I wasn't ready for squirrel busters. I mean, I don't know that anybody would be ready for something like that, but I was ready for retaliation. I set things up with the job that I had at the time, and with my life, and with my friends and everything, that they knew that something could happen, and we kind of expected it to. And when nothing did, well, that was totally fine with me. I'm not in this to be a martyr or to, be attacked by Scientology. That's not why I'm doing what I'm doing. But we were kind of ready for it. But had that happened, my life would be different. I mean, I would have, I don't know how. I just know that I probably wouldn't have been so keen to continue doing what I'm doing. And I probably would have had some things to say, which I would have done, like the first set of videos I did laying out what's wrong with Scientology and following up on that with the organizational structure, my early videos, right? I probably would have gotten those out anyway. But I don't know that I would have moved into doing this YouTubing as a full-time occupation, right? This was the result of you guys. I mean, I got so much positive feedback and commentary and so many questions and so much interest in what I was doing from you guys that's why I, moved into doing this the way that I do. And of course, I really like what I do. So it's, it works out both ways. But I imagine that if they had really wanted to come after me, they could have. I mean, Scientology certainly has the money and the resources to squash somebody like me. And they could have done that, I guess. But they're not doing that because it's a little dangerous for them to do that now. And Anonymous was absolutely the place where that started. Which is not, as I've always said, that does not invalidate the work of the earlier than Anonymous critics. It validates that, because Anonymous couldn't have happened if they hadn't been around. Arnie Lerma, Tori Magoo, Jerry Armstrong, Bob Minton, the Lisa McPherson Trust. So many people, Jesse Prince, Mark Headley, I think, was speaking out. Not, I don't think under his own name though, but by the time Anonymous came out. But so many people. I know I have not named a bunch of them, but that was necessary in order for Anonymous to happen at all. So it was a progression of things, but I definitely say that it was the tipping point. So. It's just there's a lot of conjecture here in this answer. I know this isn't like totally satisfying as an answer, but it's kind of the best I can do, because I don't know what would have happened. I just know that it could have been really ugly for me and for other critics who have come out since. And I'm glad that it wasn't. And I know and have said many times that I owe a great debt to Anonymous and to all the people who have come before me.